practicing. It's back when Chapel Street was cheap. Yeah, now it's just hipster or whatever it is. I don't know. Any questions? You look a bit zonked. Yeah. Yeah. You get enough. Yeah. Yeah. So if I summarize, no, maybe I can't summarize. Listening is difficult, and you're used to listening really carefully because of the Australian English. And you're taking what you can, and you might miss stuff, but you don't know what you've missed. You don't know whether to be frustrated or not, actually, do you? Because that's the problem. Sometimes you can be really trying hard to listen to what he's saying, and then you realize that was just a crock of shit, what he just said. But you don't know. I mean, I know because I've got the transcript, and you probably were lying there going, oh, she's so mean, she didn't give us the transcript. That wasn't the point, though. The point is I'm interested in you getting to learn to listen to his voice. And if I give you the transcript, you won't learn to listen to his voice. So it depends on what my intention is as a small T teacher. My intention was, as I said, for you to get used to listening to whatever you can from his voice. And if you have that grasping kind of, I've got to understand everything he said, it gets worse. Actually get in the way of your hearing. And it's just like if you're trying to touch somebody and you're grasping them like this, you won't feel anything. There is to feel something, you have to let go, and not walk away, but there has to be softness in your ears or in your hands or in your eyes. That's what we're talking about. So if it makes you feel any better, and I'll tell you this now after the fact on purpose, I will cut and paste that section and send it to you so you can read it. But if I told you that before, what would you have done differently? Slept, or maybe you would have been less attached and it would have been nicer for you. But would you have paid attention, had that, try to work with that idea of how do I listen to him softly? Probably not. So it is what it is. The context is what it is. That was my choice. So the talk is called Foreground and Background, or is it Background and Foreground? I can't remember. Foreground and Background. Does that title make sense to you? Yeah? And you can see how he ambles around the topic, and sometimes, you read the titles of his talk and you go, where the hell did they get that title from? Because it'll be just one thing in 6 pages. Yeah. Figure and ground. Yeah. With the Gestalt stuff. Yeah. Yeah. You could pull some metaphors out of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. And hopefully you've heard it. Whether you've heard it or not, I don't know. Zara and I have used the words foreground and background a lot. Now, whether you've heard it or not is another question. But if you listen to the tapes, you will hear that we have used it a lot in relation to what you're paying attention to, and how it gets back to our conversation this morning about you become in control of your attention because you choose what to select as foreground, and then you put it back, right? And you use the metaphor. Well, it's not a metaphor, it's a reality. It's an example of reading. If any of you have got a book near you, this is really interesting to try. He talked about, you know, you can foreground, you can do it one letter at a time, A-N-D space, T-H-E space. You know, you pluck a letter out and put it back and pluck the next one and put it, so A and A-N-D, and then I've got and I put it back, you know, and you do that. And the faster you do that, then of course it's, and the other things we said, the action we do, a movement, we learn to do something, to do it better than we normally can. So I can, that's a really rapid foreground and background stuff. Because when he said we throw the other words away, we don't, because we have to keep them there to make sense of the whole sentence. Does that make sense?
I loved what he said about love.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, so that's another example of his. So the reading is one example of the foreground, background stuff. But then he's also weaving in this idea of the entire self. And his point was that in the beginning, you say, I love you. In the beginning, you can't get away with saying, I love your nose. Like the Copenhagen girl couldn't. She clearly hadn't fallen in love with Feldenkrais. Not that he, you know. There was just one aspect of him, not his entire self, because she couldn't know his entire self, as it were. You can argue whether that's true or not, whether it's a really meaningful example for you. But the point is, that's what we're about here, is the entire self. And then we can go in to look at a detail and come back out. But it's the detail in context of the entire self. So that when you say, I love you, and they know that there's that whole task, if you like, and then you're free to go in and out on the detail. If you just go in and out on the detail without the whole, it sort of seems diminishing.
Yeah.
Right? It just reduces you to a nice ass.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I've always found that really funny. That like, what do you like? Because you could say, "Oh, I love you." It's easy to say that, but then to ask, if you were to ask, "Well, what do you love about me?" And then that's when things get all complicated and sticky. And
stick to the you. Yeah. Putting it out to detail. It is. It's reducing it to something, right? So that's the difference. When we work with people, we're working with their entire self. And it doesn't mean to say that I'm not going in and, you know, like with Alison, we were having quite a conversation about her hamstrings. But hopefully she comes away feeling like she's not just a set of hamstrings. She comes away feeling like she's a whole person, and we can foreground the hamstrings up to a point, but it's in the context of the way she uses her back and where her head is, and it's the whole of her, right? And then Julie, your question about, you know, in Feldenkrais, if somebody's like this, we don't foreground their scoliosis. You know, the curvature in their spine. It doesn't become their defining thing. It's one detail. And he answered your question really beautifully right at the end, if you're still awake. Okay, so what he said was, he said it several times in several different ways. He's talking about one of the rolling lessons that they had done on the previous Friday, which you would have done last Thursday. And saying you're lying on the right side, and he talked about it was the whole of you lying on your right side, for starters. It wasn't just your right hip or your left shoulder or whatever it was. You were lying on your right side, for starters. And then he was saying that some people cried after they had been moving like they did in that rolling backwards. Why? How? Could you imagine that a movement like that would do that? Well, the other thing that makes it hard to listen to him is that he starts a sentence and doesn't finish it. So you're investing a lot of, and then you go, oh, that was a poor investment. Oh, it isn't. Anyway, so that's like I just did, stopped and started again. I'm trying to work it. We'll get by. So what he said, you know why it was that people cried? Because we did details and the whole. Details and the whole. Details and the whole. And suddenly the person knew that some of the details, which in her life had become a nuisance, a disease, a trouble, simply dissolved, because instead of dealing with the trouble, i.e. that specific detail, what he's saying is we worked with the whole. And so she experienced that detail, either the pain, as simply one detail amongst many. So it was contextualized, put back into the whole context, instead of that detail, in this case, the pain, becoming the foreground and the defining feature of her life. I am back pain. I am scoliosis. I am in pain. That's one of the things that I have in a whole multitude of details. And I have the ability to pay attention to that detail as easily, to move in and out of attention to that detail as, so my left hip, which is sore, as to my right hip, which is not sore. I love them both, right? Doesn't mean to say I don't want it to go away, but they're all part of me. Yeah? So that really speaks to what we said this morning about we learn to have this choice over our attention, and we can explicitly foreground and background things in a way that is more sustainable and more equitable, and we don't let this cantankerous child dominate, let's say. I think that's what he said. So this disease, this trouble, this nuisance dissolved, because instead of dealing with the trouble directly, because I told you already, when you want to correct one detail, you have a trouble for life. Because you're just honing in on that one thing is the problem. And if I get rid of that, then I'll be fine. And how often does that work in your life?
Relationships.
And it's the same thing as if you say, if I get this one thing, I'll be happy. Exactly, fooling yourself, because then there'll be the next thing. I remember when the boys were going through their very acquisitive phase, and the marketing is all around this, having to have the next new phone and having to have the next new phone and the next new phone. And I'd drive them nuts, because I'd say, and will that make you happy? And they'll go, I knew what was coming. I thought, will that make you really happy? Because they because they can already start to see the pattern. You fix this one detail, you get what you think you want, or you get rid of what you think you don't want, thinking that's going to solve everything. And there's another way of dealing with these things. It's not to say that you don't have things that you want to have and want to get rid of, just that you don't foreground them so much and pin so much on them. It's in a bigger context. That sort of, am I preaching to the converted? Am I preaching to the sleepy? Yes. Oh, well, it does. And, they don't thank you for it. I mean, Eddie now just laughs, my stepson, I don't know whether he laughs because I don't tease him anymore. He's got serious. And he's 2 children, and he's, has to be a grown up now, so I don't tease him anymore. You can think of lots of things in life, can't you, that you can create, you can turn them into the trouble or the solution. And they're one of many. So with my clients, how do I manifest that with my clients? Sometimes they'll come in and they drive themselves nuts trying to work out why I've got this pain. I've got this pain here and I can't figure out why. Is it this or is it this? And we all do it. We all do it. And so I just say, look, think of 4 things and then don't stop. Just give it up, and that becomes a joke then, because they stop trying to pinpoint, the cause, the cause and the effect. Which cause? There's always 4, at least. That's my rule. Of course, the principle of no principle. Sometimes there's 2 and sometimes 6 that you can think of. And there's always hidden ones as well, especially with people in pain. I don't know why I've got this pain. I haven't done anything wrong, or, whatever. Well, I can have the same pain, and it can be because I've been reading with the book on my lap with my head like this, or it's because it's that time of the month, excuse the, graphicness, or when I'm really tired, or that's 3 reasons that I can have that pain. Sorry? Doing it for 4 hours, so there's a timing problem there, and it's the same pain, but there's lots of different things. They could all work together or not. you know, and we just get obsessed with this. Well, if I just fix that, then, you know, if I just stop reading with my head on my lap like that, head on my lap, you know, like this, it will go away. Well, no, sometimes I haven't done that, and it's related to my hormonal level, you know, blah, blah, blah. So it's just about softening that grasp on cause and effect as well. That's one of my interpretations. But I think you've all had enough thinking. All right? Some people go, I love thinking. This is where I feel comfortable, happy, thinking. And those of you who like sensing more, is she going to do an ATM? Or whatever. Yeah, it is. Oh, I agree with you. Yeah. Yep.
So we're definitely going to get the transcript, because you said that you had it. So I just kind of went sleepy night eyes, like really nice, relaxing. And although I must be, I'm a detail person, and that's so reflective. All I heard was talking about a breast, and then some young woman who wanted to take him home, and then I heard the word detail at the end, and I'm like, what the hell was that about? You know, like.
Yeah, so that's what often happens when we listen. That's why we don't listen to Amherst that much, because you know
that's
look,
projection.
You know, and that's a relatively benign one, because there's you know some of his little gems come out. You know, like I said, I can perturb you and drop in the odd thing too. He does that all the time. Around and around, and you just be going to sleep, and there'll be breasts and asses, and he'll be talking about sex and this and that and the other, and then all, you know, whatever, and then he'll be calling everybody a bunch of cripples, and then he was just starting to launch into the hunchback story, so I stopped it right there. Exactly. Yeah, so we get these little risings, and I remember when Julie and Zoran and I first started teaching without, you know, when we were kind of cut the umbilical cord with our American trained colleagues, we thought, oh, we'll put his voice in the room a little bit more, and you know, it just creates a lot of risings, and you have to deal with these little bushfires about how dare he say that about older women. You go, yeah, how dare he? Well, you know, 37 years ago and he's dead, so of course he can dare to do it. Times have changed. He was an old man then. He was 80.
Was he kind of sexist, or he's just kind of a bit of a
yeah. He was in that, you know, here's me being equally as sort of prejudiced, but that really old Eastern European way where he could be very, from what I didn't meet him, but you see in the videos, he could be very courtly and charming, but he also was, quite sexist. Because it would have been extraordinary to not be then. You know, in 1980, if you were alive in 1980, a lot of 80-year-olds were most of them. I think about my grandpa, so he's my grandpa's age. Didn't mean to be, just how they were. I mean, my grandpa had all sorts of prejudices. He was a farmer, so he thought it's just the way they were brought up. Yeah, that's right. Prejudices change. They're a shifting feast. Yes. Back box is coming into your foreground.
Regarding foreground and background, I can imagine that when people come in pain, there's so much in their pain that they need us to show them or differentiate where's not pain.
Yeah.
So they actually their awareness expands beyond.
That's right.
That focus. It's just tunnel vision.
Yep. Yeah, and that can be very challenging for some people. I think I said last week, if people come to me for a lesson and they've heard on the grapevine that my background is physio, they want pain to be the foreground. And if it's not, then they're really dissatisfied because that's their expectation. Because that's, you know, and I'm not being disparaging about physio. That's what we're trained to do in that camp. Yeah. In the Feldenkrais camp,
so that's important. That's the problem. That's what needs the solution.
That's right. They're problem solvers, trained to be, and that's great.
We're educated to be, aren't we?
Yeah. It just in this instance, it's a bit different. We defocus on that in a gentle way. Now, the other point that he said at the beginning is really important too. That he's trying to promote something that is not necessarily a discipline. It's a method or a way of thinking, sensing, feeling, doing that could help any discipline. So those of you who don't, we're not, this is called a Feldenkrais professional training program, and there is an expectation that people will become competent practitioners as such. That doesn't mean that you can't also maintain your background discipline expertise and use this method to enhance that. So that, we kind of, I use the word dichotomy a lot, we kind of binary, I don't know how do you turn binary into a verb anyway, kind of say, is it binarize? That's so not true.
Divide,
anyway. Divide. I don't know. Like people, I'm doing it for professional reasons, like it's a profession, or I'm doing it for personal reasons, as if those two things are quite separate. I'm very much of the mind that we've actually asked the wrong question there. That in my experience, having been working with this method for most of my working life, I can't separate its influence on my personal and my professional life. My personal and professional life are quite blurred anyway. So, if you're having that kind of, what's my motivation for being here? Is it for professional reasons or personal reasons? I really encourage you to think of your entire self. Yeah, your personal brain or your professional brain, personal body, professional body. Your whole self is here. Very open to see where the benefits may flow from. And then, of course, we'll drag you back to the competencies and say there are some things that we really want to ensure that you have in an embodied kind of way. All right, so enough thinking. Go and have a water in, water out for 8 minutes. I just said 8 because you're thinking 5, 10, 15, and I liked 8. Some of you thinking, oh, please give us an ATM after lunch after that torturous listening.